This isn't your grandma's cancer show.
Not your grandma's cancer show.
Hi, I'm Tatum, and today we are talking about how to be a friend to someone with cancer. So much as we don't get a manual, although it would be so handy, about how to be a patient, about how to deal with the myriad of emotional, psychological, practical things of being a cancer patient, our friends don't get a manual either. So they're often floundering just the same as we are, as what to do, what to say. And so today we are going to be talking to two amazing guests. We've got Elinor, who had cancer in her mid-30s, and she's going to be sharing a little bit about what her friends did that was really useful, as well as, a couple of things that were maybe less so. And we're also going to be talking to Neil, who had cancer in his 20s. He works for Shine Cancer Support, and he's currently training to be a therapist. So he is going to be sharing a little bit about some of those tricky conversations. Like, what do you say when words are just not enough? And it's often in that panic that we often say, sometimes things that we don't entirely, we're just talking, we're just gabbing without really thinking about what we're saying. So this will be really useful in terms of either if you are a friend and you're looking for some ideas, or if you're someone with cancer that, wants to maybe preemptively have some conversations with your friends. If you are feeling lonely, know that you are not alone in that. Pre-COVID, Shine did a survey, and 58% of adults in their 20s, 30s and 40s with cancer, 58% reported being lonely. So we need our friends at this time. It is an incredibly isolating time. 25% said that they were hesitant to tell their friends about their diagnosis. So, we need our friends, and that's what we're doing here today. So hi, Elinor. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hello, yes, hi, nice to be here.
And can you tell me a little bit about your diagnosis?
Yeah, so I'm quite new in this world, if you like. I'm just out of treatment, having been diagnosed back in April, when everything was opening up and people were all starting to meet and Zoom was sort of becoming back into the distance. All of a sudden I had to carry on with it, which was quite interesting. So I found a lump in my breast and then was diagnosed with a tumor with ER positive, so hormonal positive tumor with DCIS. It was about an 8-9 centimeter mass by the time I went, because I did everything you're not supposed to do and didn't go and get it checked out for a good few months. Having said that, it was about the same size when I felt it, so that was interesting. I had your full rounds of the full mastectomy and lymph node clearance on one side with surgery. I then had your 6 rounds of chemo, and I had 15 rounds of radiotherapy. And I will be on the hormonal then, the fun hormonal tablets for the next decade.
Yeah. So quite a year.
Yeah, there's just been a few things going on.
Yeah, just a couple. And all of that while during COVID as well.
Yeah. I don't know if that made it easier or harder in some ways, because it was easier to avoid people.
Right.
But it was also harder not being able to see people and draw upon support. I don't think it was particularly nice being in the chemotherapy chair without anybody with you.
Yeah.
That would have been quite nice to have some company.
Absolutely. So when you had the lump, when you found the lump, and you said there was that period of time before you got it checked out, and then I imagine that you had a biopsy and then you were waiting for results. Did you tell any of your friends during that time?
So I kind of ignored it, and then eventually went to the doctor for something else and sort of said, oh, can you just check this out? And got told, oh, I don't think it's anything. I can feel fibroids, but you're telling me it's a new change, and you're over 30, so the guidelines tell me I must refer you.
Okay.
So I came away from that thinking everything was fine.
Okay.
And then by the time I went to the breast clinic, the surgeon she didn't even feel my breast. She looked and it was visible, and I knew from that biopsy. But they sort of rushed the results through. I think my initial appointment was on Monday, and she said, bring somebody in with you for the results on the Friday. So I knew, but I couldn't confirm it until the Friday. And I think I didn't tell anybody in that week other than my parents and my immediate family, because people would have questions. I had questions, and I didn't have any answers.
Yeah.
It's so much to deal with. And you're still in that little denial kind of, there's this bubble of denial. This isn't really happening. The GP told me it was all going to be fine.
Right.
It's all fine.
I like that the description of a denial bubble, right? And somehow, like, not talking about it means that you can stay inside that bubble. So there are these periods of time that it can be trickier to reach out to friends and sort of easier to kind of stay inside that place.
Oh, completely. And I don't know, I can't even, that week is such a blur that I don't know if I carried on as normal with communication with friends or not, or if I just went off the radar for a week, because I just don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that time. I wasn't in a denial bubble. I knew, because it's similar to you, I knew how they treated me when I went in for the biopsy, and I was like, the nurse put her hand on my back and I was like, oh, I'm so fucked right now. Like, I just knew, and the way they guided me into the little room and everything. But yeah, it was really hard to talk to friends, and I felt like a lunatic. I was like, no, you don't understand. They brought me into the little room, and they're like, you're being a bit dramatic. Like, so, and one of my friends even got a little bit irritated with me. And I think it was because she was worried. But it came out, like she almost wanted to be really normal. And I had done something that she, would normally be like medium level irritating. But she took it up a notch just to kind of like really double down on normality. So yeah, kind of whether you're in that bubble or whether you've got friends in there with you, it's tricky.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of all emotions and bits of personality traits. I think they're kind of heightened by cancer.
Yes.
And by fear, and it's like little things that you might suppress. So I've always been a kind of, it'll be fine, we'll get there, kind of paddle underwater. And it's somebody asks you, how are you? And you just say, it's fine, it's all fine. Because you know that it will be, it might not be at the time. And you kind of go, no, I have to say that it's going to be fine. And I think that's, again, heightened. And you just go, yeah, no, this will pass. Whatever happens, you just get through.
Yeah. So when you got the news and you had the diagnosis, did you tell people one by one? Did you use social media? How did you have those initial conversations?
Yeah, so with those initial, it was a mixture. There were certain people that I felt I needed to tell straight away, and that I needed to tell person to person. And I also I wouldn't have put it past myself to kind of go on social media and just have a rant, 3 o'clock in the morning job, and just put something up there. And I thought that, and also I knew that I was going to look very different at some point during this treatment. So I thought I need to tell people, and also to raise awareness and to sort of say, don't do what I did and ignore things for a couple of months, because it could be what you're hoping it's not. So I made phone calls and wanted to tell people over the phone, because I thought, even though you couldn't meet and tell people in person, there were some people who I needed to have those conversations with. And they were all lovely. And one of them, she'd recently lost her mother-in-law to breast cancer, so she'd been through the whole I hate the word journey, but we'll say it for now. So things like that, you can't. I was still very mindful that it could be triggering for other people.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing, is everyone's got their own experiences, and and kind of they have their own levels of capacity depending on what's going on in their lives as well. And so
once I sort of spoke with a few people, I kind of thought, right, well, I need to control this news. I need to put it out there. And how can I do it in a way that's not particularly, that's not too personal, but also gives the message. And I didn't have the words to say it. So I in the times of 3 o'clock in the morning insomnia, instead of going and ranting on Facebook, I went and bought a very sweary T-shirt.
Oh, tell us the T-shirt.
It's a very pretty T-shirt, and it says, "Stay strong, fuck cancer."
Nice. And did you model said T-shirt?
Do you know, I didn't, because I couldn't actually wear it. Again, it was still the stage of processing. I needed the news to be out there.
Uh-huh.
I knew that I would wear the T-shirt. So I just took a sort of photo of this really, and it's such a pretty, beautiful, flowery design. The ones you normally associate with all the positive affirmation messaging. Mm-hmm. And it's just the different slogan. And I just put that on Facebook saying, and other social media, so I have cause to wear this T-shirt a bit over the next few months. If in doubt, get checked out, you're not too young. And then just left it.
Yeah.
Didn't respond straight away. And obviously had lovely comments from people. People got in touch. But I couldn't. Again, it was part of the processing. I couldn't react to them straight away.
Yeah. Did that feel a bit overwhelming?
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's lovely that you get this support. But when it all comes at once in a flood,
yeah,
it's quite scary in a different way. You don't want to you want to be able to respond to people properly, because you know that there's some really heartfelt messages. Yeah. And it's just, I didn't have the words to respond at that time.
I am so with you on that. It's been 10 years now for me. I still feel guilty. I mean, there are some days I think maybe I should go back through my messages, because I know there were messages that I didn't respond to, and actually the nicest ones, because at the time I thought, I don't want to send just a thoughtless reply. I wanted to say thank you so much. I wanted to ask them about their lives, and I wanted to have a really considered, and my brain was at max, so I couldn't do those things that I desperately wanted. And so I just carried this overwhelming guilt about those messages. And I think, what I would say to people, to friends, is that it is appreciated. It really, really, really is. It's just that depending on the day that it came in, there's just it's like a capacity issue. It's a broadband issue, and another day you can respond really easily.
Oh, completely. It's definitely comes in waves, and that timing and it can be completely random. But I remember I just finished my first round of chemo, and I had a phone call from an ex-colleague. And this was a job I'd been made redundant from shortly before my diagnosis. And I just, at that point, I just thought, I can't deal with this. And she was ringing at 9 o'clock at night, I think. And it was 2 days, the day of or the day after my first or second chemo. And I just rejected it and thought, well, if she leaves me a voicemail or sends me a text, I can deal with this.
Right.
But I just didn't have the energy to be going on a conversation with somebody when it just comes from the blue. Mm-hmm. So I much prefer it when people would just text me and allow me to process and get back to them in my own time.
Yeah. And also that understanding that late evenings, early mornings aren't great when you're going through chemo. Like that's, I mean, you know, everyone's different, obviously, but for a lot of us, there is a, timing issue, isn't there?
Oh, 9 o'clock and I was in bed. Guaranteed.
And how did you feel about people that asked you for a lot of information? Like, did you have anyone like really pressing you for details?
Yeah, it was quite invasive. And again, overwhelming in a different way. Because even though I chose to share my cancer diagnosis, and I completely understand why people wouldn't, even though I chose to share it, it was still my information to control. And sometimes we don't have, you know, we're still waiting for details from doctors and diagnoses. First thing everyone says is kind of, oh, what stage, and I remember it was one of the first questions I asked, and they wouldn't give me an answer. They just said, well, we don't know. It'll need to be biopsied, but we are treating the tumour, not the stage. And I thought actually that was quite a useful way to put it. But there were some people who kind of just kept wanting more and more personal information. And at the end of the day, nobody's entitled to that but me. So I kind of had to just step back and stop. And sometimes you'd reply once and then you'd get kind of 4 or 5 questions back.
Oh, yeah.
And you think, well, hang on, I've just kind of shared what I'm prepared to share.
Yeah.
That doesn't need to go any further.
Yeah, so there are people that can turn into cancer tourists, as they're sometimes known. I had someone call me the day of my diagnosis, asked me 1 billion questions, and never contacted me again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think just wanted the deets to pass on, maybe have some currency in her next conversation, that she knew someone who, you know, but yeah, never once texted me, never once called me again. So yeah, that it can feel, and I think it's quite useful for people to know that, like, while questions are lovely, it's also quite handy to maybe say, I have some questions because I'm really interested, but how are you feeling today? Like, are you up for questions? Like, would you prefer just to let me know, you know, what you'd like to share? And I think just even that awareness about questions, I think, is useful.
Yeah, I still harbour some guilt from years ago, where a friend who lived in the same village as me, her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and we were both at university at the time, so her mum was quite young. And I heard through the village, she didn't tell me. So I kind of thought, I don't want to, you know, I was a teenager and I didn't want to approach her and say, are you doing okay? Because I was kind of thinking maybe she doesn't want me to know for some reason. But actually I didn't realize how much resentment she harbored that I hadn't reached out to her. And I've always felt guilty about it. So it kind of ended our friendship a few years later. I mean, we drifted apart anyway, but it's something that I always felt guilty about. So I think reaching out in a kind of just a gentle way is definitely, you know, it's so appreciated from me. And I've done it myself, and even just mentioning, contacting somebody and saying, look, I'm here, I understand this is going on with you, that you've had this horrible news, sorry that you've got to have the cocktails, the toxic cocktails, but if you do want to chat, I have been through it, and just message me at any point.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I think there's a couple of things in there that I think remembering back to your friends that have been through tough things and like remembering like how that felt for you, like, because, you know, I've definitely had friends that went through stuff that I like stumbled into what I was saying, and like not really sure how to handle it, and kind of then acknowledging when people were stumbling around me. It kind of gave a little bit of a buffer. But also, I suppose the other thing that it makes me think of is that, you know, in regular friendships, we have a back and forth, you know, what's going on in your life, what's going on in your life. And when cancer comes along, it can sometimes skew that, right? So that our friends don't always tell us what's going on in their lives because they don't want to bother us, which can make us feel more isolated. Or you can have somebody, you know, saying, oh, the worst thing happened to me today. And you're like, really? I'm not sure. You know what I mean? And they're talking like completely like normal, but it actually isn't anymore. And it can be so subtle. It's a tonal thing. So did you want your friends to talk to you about what was going on with them? And did you have any of those moments where you're like, really?
I definitely, so even though you're going through something, you're still you, and you still want to be there for your friends.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you're excluded, because you're going to be excluded from things, you can't go and do what you would normally do.
Right.
You can't be there in the same capacity. But if they don't tell you and involve you, then all of a sudden, when you're released back into the wild, if you like, you've got all of this. It's overwhelming enough as it is, and then you've got all this stuff to catch up on. You know, finding out that maybe somebody's relationship has ended and they're now with somebody else, and you've kind of thought, oh, hang on, you went through a divorce and didn't tell me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a major change. Yeah.
Yeah. And even though you're not able to be there, I'm not able to, you know, I wasn't able to be there in the same capacity. You still want to help in the ways that you can.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, for me anyway, just sitting around at home going, there's not much I feel well enough to do. But sometimes something that you do feel well enough to do is to take the focus and kind of, it's nice to be distracted by somebody else's problems.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing. Like, if your friend like comes to you and is like, okay, do you want distraction? And you're like, yes, please. Then they're like, okay, so I've had the worst day, right? Like, that's totally different. You're like, I'm in for the distraction. Tell me what went wrong with your eyebrow threading, you know, even as I'm sitting here with no eyebrows, right? Like, yes, oh, I understand this pain, right? Like, but it's all about kind of the setup of like, have they checked in? Do you want distraction today? Or, you know, something that sort of pads it. And I'd love to bring Neil in at this point. So Neil's beside me in the studio.
Hello.
And so Neil, do you think that this is quite a common thing that comes up, this friends keeping things to themselves during that time and kind of like not telling you stuff?
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely think there's something in there about like we call it within Shine top trumping yourself. So there's something within it where, I mean, if you always think someone must have it worse, where does that end? You know, that it's not always really helpful behavior. I mean, sometimes it can make sense. If someone stubbed their toe, the world might not be ending if you've got cancer. But I do think people do want to know, like similar to what Elinor was saying, you're still you. You don't want life to go on. You don't want to feel left out. You already feel quite different after having a cancer diagnosis. So it can definitely feel really isolating and feel like everyone's moving away with their lives and they've got other things going on and you're not part of that anymore because of this thing that you've had no control over.
And so how old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was 26 when I was diagnosed. Yeah, I had a medulloblastoma, which is a cancerous brain tumour. Don't ask me to spell it, I have no idea. And I had surgery and radiotherapy with that.
And how did you tell your friends initially? Like, were you quite...
Yeah, I mean, so I did a Facebook post just for everyone because I didn't have, similarly to what you were saying, I didn't have that capacity to individually message people, and it was a real shock and really sudden, and I was going straight in for surgery about a week later, and there wasn't a lot of process time, so I just put a message out there on Facebook. But I did have the negative response to that left it open to anybody to say whatever they wanted to say. Which was some of the responses were really, really touching, and people that I hadn't spoken to for years, and people that I'd only known for a week or something like that on holiday, or there were some really lovely responses, and a lot of a lot of helpful things, I think. However, there were some that I was a bit like, why are they saying this? Or it gave people a license to sort of go, well, this is what you should do to cure everything. Or,
okay, so you were getting sent some cures.
Yeah, definitely. Or some sort of like, oh, it's not that bad. Or, oh, I hope you're okay because my neighbour had cancer and died. And I was like... everything, like, I could see the positive and the negative side of doing it that way. Yeah.
So in there's sort of minimization. There
is everything.
There is the I mean, I think it's a really common one. Oh, my ex had this and they died.
Yeah.
I see Eleanor's eyes rolling. Yeah. Does that sound familiar?
So much. And it was lovely, but especially when it was my parents' friends, and so many of them would go, oh, well, I know so and so, and I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you. And I thought, that's great, that's lovely, but they were talking about people who were 30 years older than me, and also on top of that, they were kind of people that I don't know and wasn't close to, and they were just saying, oh, well, approach this person, go and talk to them. Why?
Yeah. Yes. And Elinor, what was like something that you did get that you felt really taken care of or understood, like a way that a friend reached out and you're like, oh, I love this?
I mean, there were lots of ways, but the one that really made me cry because I was so overwhelmed by it, and it arrived when I got home from surgery. A friend had bought me a box, and it was this cancer care box thing, and every single thing in it was so useful and well thought out. You had peppermint teas, you had sweet drops, you had moisturizer, all the moisturizer, eye masks, and I don't know whether they worked or not, but I wore them for every round, and I didn't get that bad sickness. Some travel wristbands.
Okay.
And warm socks and a lovely blanket, and I used everything in that box. And the fact that they'd done this research to sort of think what is the best gift, because and don't get me wrong, I absolutely love flowers. I love flowers, but I think the problem is it's a bit like when people message you, it all comes at once.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I'd be running around trying to find vases places where I wasn't. Whereas actually, if you stagger it, and send me a lovely bunch of flowers, that's great, and I really, really love it. But maybe just think, oh, actually, can we send it in a month's time? Because I'm having the same thought.
Yes, I totally relate to that. And how bad do you feel when you're really sick on the sofa and you've got those flowers in the corner that you haven't taken care of and they start to die? Like, you just feel like the worst person in the world. And you're like, I just can't face it. I just can't get up. I can't go over there. I actually got a bunch of flowers so large. They look like funeral flowers. Like, they were ridiculous. I mean, they might have actually been my best friend came in and she was like, oh yeah, you're not going to want these. They were from someone that wasn't really thinking things through. So yeah, like, flowers can be tricky. I love that. Neil, was there something for you that, like, a way that your friend showed up for you that you felt like, they're really here?
Yeah, for sure. I think There was a few different things. One thing that I absolutely loved, that I've talked to quite a lot of people within the Shine community that had similar feelings about this, was I had a couple of friends who I would say, you know, especially because I was diagnosed with a brain tumor and they didn't know if it was cancer. Then it was cancer. Then I was like, it was kind of bad news after bad news, and I kept having something to share with people that wasn't great. And one or two of my friends, they would just go, that's really shit. That just sucks. Full stop. Not what about these 16 things that you can do, not this is what you can do to cure yourself, not any advice, nothing, just being there with you. And there's a really interesting video that we use within Shine. You can look at it on YouTube, but it's by Brené Brown. And it looks at the difference between sympathy and empathy. And sympathy is sort of saying, well, at least it's curable, or sort of silver lining what you're going through.
Yeah, it's like any sentence that starts with at least.
At least, or why don't you do this, or this is what you should do. Whereas actually empathy is just being like, I'm here with you. If you want to sit here and you want to play video games and just pretend nothing's happening, I'm here with you. Or if you want to give me a call and just spend some time talking about soap operas, I'm here with you. Like whatever. Yeah. And I think that can be a really helpful thing, where sometimes as a friend you can maybe check in and go, what do you want to do? How do you want to do this? Like that can be a really thoughtful thing. And then I also discovered that one of my sort of love languages is time. So I had a friend who just, even though he was petrified of flying, in the middle of a storm flew from London to Inverness and came and saw me. And I mean, that just, like, I broke down in tears. And it was just lovely. But people just making an effort, and people just, you know, showing that they cared, not sort of trying to fix you in their eyes, really.
Because I think there's a very common thing that sometimes happens, because I think people are scared of silence. You know, what you were saying, like that's really shit, and then just letting that sit, like, I'm just here with you. I think a lot of people panic,
definitely,
and say things that sound lovely, and are meant lovely. And this is the thing, like, no one has the handbook, right? Like, they are lovely, they're meant lovely, but they can sometimes actually make you feel more alienated. And they're like you're so brave. Yeah. You're so inspirational. You're so positive.
Yeah.
And in a way, then you feel like you can't say anything that would contradict that. You can't say, actually, I'm really shit scared right now. Actually, I had a panic attack this morning, you know? So, like, Neil, is there a name for, like, what that is? Is that, like, putting an identity onto somebody else?
Yeah, I guess I've been thinking of a sort of analogy for that, and it's a bit like if someone rings your doorbell and they've got 14 casseroles, and you answer the door and you're like, oh, thanks, but, like, I didn't really ask for any casseroles. Like, it's someone saying, you know, oh, you're so brave, but, like, I didn't ask you to put an emotion on me, or you must be so scared, or you must be so happy, or you should feel like this. But you might not feel like that. Like, a lot of people, when they go into remission, don't feel happy. I didn't feel happy when I went into remission. I was done with everything. I was petrified. I didn't know what the future held. So being told you should feel so happy makes you then start to think, why do I not feel happy? Yeah. So I guess it's the sort of, like, giving of an emotion, or like handing over something that someone's not asked for. And just reframing that question in a very different way. So instead of saying to a friend of yours, you should feel so happy, just saying, how do you feel?
How do you feel?
Asking a question instead of putting, I mean, I disagree with the word should. I try not to use it as much as possible. But a lot of that is just asking someone. There's so much of a range with what people go through after a cancer diagnosis. We see it all the time in Shine with the programs that we do, that there's not one thing that someone, like, yes, I'm feeling this now. Someone might feel really happy after going into remission, but someone might not. So asking them and inquiring and just seeing how they are can be really powerful. And similarly to what you're saying, like, a lot of people struggle with silences and get worried about what to say. but I think a really great thing to say sometimes is, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Like, that's so powerful. I mean, if I had a friend going through something that I had no idea about, like a trauma or a grief that I didn't know, saying, I just have no idea what to say right now. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Full stop.
Right. I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. And that is so powerful, I think.
Yeah, it really is. And and I think that it's so tricky, and because how people talk about their own cancer is so individual, right? So somebody might be like, I feel like a brave badass. I feel like a fierce warrior. And if they are saying that, if that is their chosen language for it, then you can reflect that back. But if someone is not using those words, is not, saying this is how I'm kind of identifying on this at this time, then when you use those words, it's like you're talking about somebody else that isn't really them, And so as a way of connecting, sometimes it is about just really reflecting, like just listening to the words that they are using to describe it, and then just mirroring those words back. Yeah. So when you're really stuck for something to say, is that something that you would? Yeah,
I mean, interestingly that you mentioned the word mirroring there, because I was just thinking like that's one of the skills in counselling that people learn is mirroring. So if someone's using language or display, if someone's using a lot of swear words, maybe they're comfortable with swearing. If someone's describing themselves as a badass, like maybe it's worth incorporating that. Like mirroring is so powerful, and that's why with a lot of therapists people feel so safe, because they're mirroring a lot of your language or your body language. Or if someone's feeling really down and they're sort of like heads down, being all bubbly and shouting around them might not be the best. It might be, but probably not. So often mirroring is so helpful and so insightful and so useful for people, I think.
Yeah, and so like as a friend, seeing your friend, so taking on the friend hat and being there in that moment of like panic of, oh my God, I care so much about this person. I wanna make it better, because that's usually 90% of the time, 95% of the time what they're thinking. You have a couple of toxic friends, which I think all of us have discovered and also lost during this time. I think that's a really standard thing. So like they do exist. But I think a lot of people in that panic, that's quite a tangible thing to actually go, okay, ask a question and then just listen to the words that someone's using to hear what they need.
Yeah, and that's another really important counselling skill as well, is active listening. So a lot of the time people will ask you a question and then might be scrolling through Instagram, or might say, oh, how are you feeling today? And then look out the window or something. and you're like, in your head, you're like, but you don't really care. So active listening in that you ask something and you're not thinking up what you're going to say next. You ask a question, you say, how are you feeling today, Tatum? And then you just sit there and you really just listen. And it can be quite tiring, it can be quite draining, but it's so powerful, and so few people in day-to-day life do it, that it can be really powerful for your friend that you can be that person listening to them. They might not have had anyone ask that, let alone give them that time to listen as well.
And do you think it's worth having sort of preemptive conversations with your friends?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I wish I'd done. Although the majority of my friends were really great, I think it can be really helpful language-wise to be like, this is how I'm seeing this. Similarly to what I was saying before about words like brave, or some people feel brave, and that's awesome. I would never want someone not to feel brave, but that's definitely not a word I identify with. I find it quite uncomfortable when someone gives it to me, and I definitely don't feel that. Especially since I've had days where I'm sort of like just crying in bed. Yeah. So sometimes being like, this is how I'm seeing things. The way I would say it is, something really awful happened to me. I'm glad to still be here. I still have quite a lot of side effects. I still, try and put a brave face on things. Well, I try and put a face on things anyway. That's how I see it. And often if someone sort of takes a different way, you can be like, well, that's not really how I see it, and you can kind of reference back to that conversation. But sometimes having a sort of script about yourself, I always think that's useful, especially if you're meeting new friends, if you're dating, if you're meeting new people, having a story you say about yourself. So this is what happened to me. I like to keep it quite short. This is what happened to me, but yeah, let's move on and talk about something else. Why don't we go for a walk here? Or let's go to this pub. And I think having that preemptive conversation, but also, interestingly, doing that with yourself as well, having maybe a bit of reflection time and just thinking about how you see yourself and what language and how you would like people to talk around you.
Yeah, because we often get triggered, right? We often don't know how we're feeling until somebody says something and you're like, ooh, that made me feel shitty, right? Like there is a little bit of a learning curve. I remember going out with two women for dinner, and at the time I was suffering with really bad fatigue. I was so tired. And I was having a hard time getting up in the morning. It was actually physically painful for me to wake up because I wasn't really sleeping and I was hot flushing the entire night. And my days were incredibly short because of this debilitating fatigue. And one of them said, oh, what time did you get up? And I don't know, I think I said something like 9. And the peals of laughter, because they both had kids. So they thought this was hilarious. And I was like, oh God, I feel lazy. And I know I'm not, but it just came down like a barrier. And then one of them was talking about someone that she knew that had cancer like quite a long time ago. And it was back in like the old days of radiation where she was left with a seeping wound. And she said, oh, and she never complained. And I was like, oh, did you just throw some shade at me? Like, now I can't complain. Like, you guys can continue talking about your lives, complain about anything that you feel like. But now I feel like I can't complain because, this lady with cancer with a seeping wound, she never complained. And it felt very silencing, and it felt, really, really alienating. And if I could go back in time, one of the things that I wish that I could have maybe been more clear about is maybe saying in those moments, like, oh, like, I do complain. It fucking sucks. and just owning it, right? But you're tired and depleted. And, these are the things that are just, you're thinking, oh, is everyone else with cancer dealing with this better than me? And this is why it's so useful to have these kinds of conversations and hear from other people with cancer that you're not alone if you're feeling alone. And I think another thing that I wish was that that either with myself or with another person, that there could have been a code for whether or not I needed advice or just needed to vent. Right? Like, I wonder, could that be a preemptive conversation?
Oh, 100%. There's a sort of trend going around, people might have seen it on TikTok, but it's about, it's apparently like a relationship saver, but it's kind of asking people when they say something to you. So someone might say, I've had a really tough week. Work's been tough. I had chemo on Monday. It was really, everything was a struggle. And then as the response to the friend, you might say, well, do you want comfort advice? And that can be a preemptive way of saying, like, how do you want me to deal with this?
Yeah.
Because often we go straight to advice or straight to comfort. Yeah. And I know for myself, I'm quite... I don't really like a lot of advice a lot of the time. So yeah, just a hug. Yeah, great. I remember like when I was starting to date after I had my cancer diagnosis and finding it really tough and my confidence was depleted. My housemate, I came back and I was in tears and he was like, do you want a hug? And I was like, oh, yes, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Instead of being like, well, here are the 17 things that you should do next time. And I'm like, I just feel shit and I just want a hug. But yeah, having that sort of comfort or advice can be really helpful.
And I think that almost if you can create codes, I mean, I think that we need more emojis for this. So I think there needs to be an emoji for I'm thinking of you, no need to respond, you know, or like N2R, like something that means that you can reach out to someone, and maybe even ask a question, but be also like, I totally understand if you can't contact me back. Like, I'm not expecting it. You know, having those codes in advance or I think would be incredibly useful. And the thing is, we often have that for other people with cancer.
Yeah. Right?
Like, so when we text our friends, like, we're like, it comes so easily, like, you know, just to let you know, I know you've got a big day today. I'm thinking about you. Don't worry about contacting me back. Like, you know, and it's almost like it's funny how easily you can get into that. And Elinor, have you found that your friendships are different with other people with cancer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that there's any positives to cancer because it's just shit. However, what I would say is the friendships that I'm making and the links through it. And obviously, again, this has been in time of COVID, but from the people on various online communities, from the Shine breakout was just a game changer. The Shine breakout group for me, because again, it's just there's a WhatsApp group and we're there with mutual support for each other, and it's really lovely. And hopefully we'll be going on some of us will be meeting up and going on a trip to see some alpacas somewhere. And even so, yesterday I had I think probably one of the best days I've had in 2 years, because I got back in the swimming pool, but then somebody else was having a really rough day in that group, and it didn't matter that one of us, you know, we were still there. You don't have to hide your positives because somebody's got a negative in that, because you're happy for each other.
Yeah.
And it's just quite relaxing to be part of those friendships.
Yeah.
I met one person for coffee, thinking that, oh, you know, this is exciting. I get to meet somebody in person. And thinking that we'd be about half an hour. Well, 3 hours later, so because it was just really exciting and just so refreshing to be able to share some of the thoughts. And you know, part of the conversation was heavy, but also part of it was hilarious.
Yep.
And these sort of Zooms like this, I can think, oh, well, I've had a really, really nice day. Do I really want to be doing something cancery? But actually, when you go and, yeah, there's always mixed emotions sort of having sort of friendship meetups and Zooms within that group. But you always end up laughing and coming away, no matter how dark the conversation.
Yep.
And I don't think that my other friends who haven't been involved in this world would actually get it. Mm-hmm. I very much emphasize, please use dark humor with me, because it really helps for me. And one or two friends are brilliant, and they're great like that. I think some of the most unexpected friendships and sort of the unexpected supports have been from people who, you know, there were a couple of people I met on dating websites and hadn't met up with yet, but actually I called it off because I got diagnosed when I was about to go and meet them. And they're just very helpful little friendships. You know, they'll message, how are things today? One of them kept me massively entertained because he's been telling me all of his bad dating stories. So I think it's unexpected. And because he hasn't known me before cancer.
Yeah.
So it's not just people within the cancer community, it's the people that haven't known me before.
Yeah.
I'm still the same person, but I'm probably Elinor 2.0 now.
That's a good way of putting it.
It's quite funny. I look back at photos of myself and I don't recognize myself 5 years ago. Genuinely, I went to have an ID check this week and my passport photo and my driver's license, they've still got 5 years to run on them. And she was just like, is this actually you? I don't recognize myself in photos of a couple of years back now.
Yeah. And I think that's, that's a useful thing of reminding yourself, like, if you're ever at a dinner like I was, that I felt quite isolated and quite estranged. And this didn't happen all the time. I had lots of amazing friends. But if you are feeling that way, then it can be really useful to know that actually balancing out your friendships with cancer friendships can be really nourishing all around. How would you say that it's affected people that have come through like the Shine programs, like knowing other people with cancer, and how that's kind of positively impacted their friendships?
I think it's really awesome. We did a study and we saw that although a lot of people had lost friends, there was something like 25% of people had gained friends after being diagnosed with cancer. And I know certainly for myself, I first got involved with Shine in January 2018, and we've the people I was on the program with, we still have a WhatsApp group and we still chat to each other. I recently turned 30 and some of them came to my birthday party, and it was just really nice. And it's a group of people who do just get it and do understand, and you don't have to. I mean, when I do meet new people, it's in the back of my head where I'm like, at some point I'm gonna have to tell them,
right?
Whereas these people just know, like, you can say, oh yeah, that big massive scar on the back of my head, that's because I had a brain tumor. Oh, okay, cool. What movies do you like?
Right.
Not like oh yeah, not going off on some of the tangents that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And I also think we talk about it a bit in the group, but as well, like, kind of owning those codes that you were mentioning earlier. So like I've got a few as well. So when I get really bad fatigue, I often say, oh, I've got bad fatigue, and then someone will say, you should have a nap, and I don't want to have a nap, and I don't want to be told what to do either. So I'll say I just need to be horizontal for half an hour. Usually that doesn't mean asleep, but just kind of code for like I'm just feeling a bit iffy,
Yeah.
And I also really recommend using fruit names as codes for things.
Okay.
So I'm gonna disclose a little bit, but so me and my girlfriend, I'm very extroverted, she's quite introverted, and when she needs a bit of time by herself, she, instead of having a big long conversation, she'll say, well, I just need some pineapple time. Oh. And and I know what she means straight away. Yep. I'm like, okay, I'll see it a bit. And so maybe in coming up with some of those yourself, if you've got a really close friend saying, you know what, I'd love to come, but today's a bit of a raspberry day,
I love that. And that is one of the things that happens with the Shine programs, is you end up developing a language to talk about these things. So if you haven't heard of spoon theory, that's also another way that people talk about fatigue in terms of spoons. And then when you have that language, and when you have that, then you can also share that with your friends outside. And also you realize like how you are when your friend tells you something that's really tough. And then it's almost like you can then mirror that to your friendships outside and kind of lead them along too. And one thing before we go, just say there is a friend listening to this and they are like, I fucked up. I wasn't there at the beginning. And is it too late? Is it too late to reach out now? What would you say, Neil? I
would say definitely not. It can be difficult, especially if someone was really close and they've ghosted you. If you feel like if you're the friend and you feel like you said, oh, I fucked up, But own that and say to them, I really fucked up. I couldn't message you. I couldn't deal with this. I'm so sorry. Yeah. I'd love to be there now. let me know what I can do.
Yeah.
Or do you want to go for a coffee? It might not work, but I
Sure.
mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? If you send that message, yes, no, what's the worst that's going to happen? I think the majority of people that I know within Shine that I speak to would say, you know, I'd give them a chance. I can certainly remember times in my life when people have had hard things happen to them, and before I had cancer, that I look back on and I think, oh, that wasn't great. Yeah, I'm not proud of myself in that moment. I didn't really say the right things, or I said this or I said that, and sort of, I think from my point of view, I'd always encourage people to just send that message and just be honest.
Yeah.
You might have been having something really traumatic, and they might not know, and it could be a really great like bonding experience. You just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the nods from Elinor. I can see the similar thing there. And actually, I think you have waves like we were talking about earlier when things all come at once. Actually, I remember, so when I was diagnosed, a very good friend of mine was in a horrendous car accident, and I was also very close to his sister. And, you know, due to us both being immunocompromised and him being in a coma, I couldn't get there. And I felt awful. And then when I could get there, she just wrapped her arms around me and she said, yeah, the friends are starting to drop off now. You know, that actually you do sometimes need a second or a third wave of friends. And she was just so happy when I got there when I could. And so, you know, I would say, I would always want to extend that out as well. Like if someone feels like they haven't been there, you know, being honest, showing up when you can is lovely. Thank you so much, Elinor, for being on the show today.
No, it's been great. And, you know, what you were saying there is definitely, I've had a couple of friends who have reached out and just sent little messages sort of going, oh, I have been thinking of you for 6 months, but I didn't have the words.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's fine. And then I could reply to them. So, yeah, no, it's been lovely to have a chat and have a think about it as well.
Oh, excellent. And thank you, Neil, so much.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And if you enjoyed this topic, we have many others. They are now wherever you listen to podcasts. So they're on Google, they're on Audible, they're on iTunes. Oh my God, where's the other places?
Spotify.
So basically, anywhere you'll bump into our podcast, and we would love you to listen to the others. And thank you, as always, to Radio Facilities for sponsoring our show and recording us and being so wonderful. Until next time, bye.